Welcome everyone to Politically Jumbled, the weekly rundown. So, I'm not like 100%, but I did want to get on here and at least try to do a weekly video. So today we're going to talk about crime. If you look at 2020, it says more Americans died of gun-related injuries in 2020 than any other year on record. And so it's just climbing each year. We're in 2022 now. Now we'll talk about the crime, the impact on the black community and black Americans. So it says black Americans are disproportionately impacted by gun violence. They experience 10 times the gun homicides, 18 times the gun assault injuries, and nearly 3 times the fatal shootings by police of white Americans. Wow, that's interesting. So it's disproportionately prevalent in historically underfunded neighborhoods and cities. It says each day, on average, 30 black Americans are killed by guns and more than 110 experience non-fatal injuries. At least every other day, a black person is shot and killed by police. Black men and teens are killed by guns 20 times more than their white counterpart. That's from the CDC. That's their data showing that. Let's see. Black men and boys ages 15 to 34 make up just 2% of the nation's population. They were among 37% of gun homicides that year. That's 20 times higher than white males of the same age group. So that was 2019 is when that report came out. So it says black men were nearly 14 times more likely to die in a firearm homicide than white men, and 18 times more likely to die in a firearm homicide than the general population, including women. It says black women and girls are also at a higher risk. Black females have the highest risk of being killed by a firearm than females of any other race or ethnicity, and they were 4 times more likely to be victims than white females. So it says gun violence has for the longest time been a public health crisis in the black community. Okay. It says 1 in 5 African American deaths happens earlier than if they were white. So this is about our health disparities too. So we catch it from all ends. That's an interesting fact right there. This is from the Marshall Project. Okay, let's keep going. So these are health inequalities. So we face health inequalities and, crime. That's crazy. It says black Americans are killed at 12 times the rate of people in other developed countries. Wow. I'm just going to read the headlines because we kind of get the point. It says gun violence is a racial justice issue. It says gun violence alone reduces the life expectancy of black Americans by 4 years. And yet the U.S. largely ignores the external systematic factors driving inequality and violence in black neighborhoods. So we got an increase in nation's homicide rate in modern history. So gun violence is on the rise, and it's especially prevalent in the black communities, which we knew, underfunded communities as well. It says U.S. gun homicides reach highest level in 25 years during the COVID pandemic. Okay, so you get the point. Let's exit out of here, and let's just talk about what I'm talking about. Okay, so I've been watching like these news clips about things happening in various communities around the world. And now a lot of people are very delusional to think that, that crime is not something that we should be addressing in our own community. I think it's crazy that we don't feel like we can fight multiple fires at once. If the problem in these communities is poverty, why haven't we looked at the solution? And welfare has never been the solution. Social programs have never been the solution. Those programs never had black Americans in thought. We were always an afterthought when it came to those programs. And those programs only want to control the behaviors of the poor, not necessarily lift the poor out of poverty. And so I think that, this situation that's happening in a lot of inner cities, a lot of black neighborhoods is very sad. When we think about kids that have to grow up in these environments, that have to become desensitized to violence, and might have to repeat that same cycle. It's just sad to see. So I think it is something that we should talk about in our communities. I'm not going to call it black on black crime because there's nothing like that. I'm just going to say that we should address crime in our neighborhoods. We should address the rise in numbers that's going on. What is it that we can help solve this? Is it youth programs? Is it guaranteed income programs? Is it skills and trades so people can, start working 4 and 5 jobs so they can be back home and have a higher pay? What is the solution here? We can't just talk about the problem all day long and never address it. Now, me personally, what I feel like the problem is that we got years of people believing that they were stuck in their situation, they can never get ahead. We have years of people stuck in the victim mentality. I think needs to happen first. It has to be a mindset change because you can't help people that are not willing to be helped. But beyond that, I do feel like there are systems in place that has contributed to the crisis we see in front of us. But at the same time, there's a lot of other components besides the systematic, besides the poverty. It's something bigger than that, in my opinion. I feel like people are really feeling hopeless with no will to live and no regard to life. And when you're at that point, you just don't care anymore. And so, how do you address despair and hopelessness? Like, you got to give somebody the will to live. You got to give them hope. Like, how do you do that, type of thing. So it's a lot of things that you have to address when we talk about crime. And so what I think is also very sad is that when it comes to social programs, when it comes to welfare, Section 8, and all of these things, it puts these people together. When I look at all of the crime statistics, when I look at what's going on around the world, looking at what the news is reporting, it's just, I find it interesting that we can gloss past this one issue and want to focus on so many other things. Because if we don't address it now, do we fear that it could get worse, or do we think that it'll rectify itself eventually, So I would like to see a conversation, being had about the crimes happening, especially in these underfunded communities. Is more funding needed? What is needed to help this situation? How do we address and tackle those underlying issues so we can solve the crime crisis? I don't understand why it's so hard to have that conversation. I know that, dealing with I think what it is that this is bigger than anybody wants to admit, and it's going to take a lot of undoing of years of brainwashing to really get people out of their present situation. And that's just the God honest truth. Now, moving on from crime, we're going to talk about poor people for 5 seconds. Now, when I think about poor people, a lot of people think that they're not doing enough to lift themselves out of poverty, right? And I think that that's not the case in majority of the cases. I think a lot of people try really hard. I think people work really hard. I think they have a strong work ethic. But I think, especially when it comes to black minorities, we've always had it hard. Like, for example, welfare helped lift a lot of white families out of poverty, but it kept us stuck in poverty because those programs were never meant for us. We didn't have access to a lot of the earlier programs that would have helped us build wealth over time. So we've always lagged behind. But we've made a lot of progress in this country despite all of those adversities. So when I think about poor people in general, not black or white, I think what could help a lot of people progress forward. They say it's education, but what's crazy is when we look at the racial wealth gap, it has widened over the years, even with us getting education because, student loans and stuff like that. So I do think that, looking at what fields we go into, opening up businesses, start owning homes, those are our way to upward mobility. But just getting the process started, I don't even know, like, where we start. But I think that, instead of us looking at poor people like the gum under our shoes, we should see them just as valuable in this society, right? And try to figure out something that could really help others. And no social programs and no, not welfare, because those things have never been solutions. They've always been problems to the problem. And so, it's just, I think people don't understand that when you come from absolutely nothing, you don't have anything. That is really hard to make your way. It's really hard to get something in this world. You can work to death and still not get anything. And so I believe that, that things are attainable for us all. But I do think sometimes it is harder for some people. And that's just the truth, whether people want to admit it or not. Because working hard doesn't mean that you're going to live a good life. A lot of people that are rich today didn't get there by working hard. Some of them got there by luck and chance. Some of them got there just, they were born into it. What about those situations? Some people are, just got a chance to be born with a silver spoon. But if you come from nothing and if you got generations of nothing, like, it's really, really tough to pull yourself up by your own bootstraps, like people like to say. I know, because I'm trying it right now, and it's extremely hard. It's way harder than I ever thought that it would be. So yeah. So that is all I got to say about poor people. Oh yeah, please, I got a book, Politically Jumbled, with all of my unpopular opinions. I don't feel my best today, so all of my points are kind of jumbled, a little confused, all over the place. But my book, Politically Jumbled, kind of puts it all together. There was also a mass shooting in Tulsa, Oklahoma at the hospital. We're waiting on more information about that, so I won't speak on that, but rest in peace to those that we lost in that mass shooting. It's sad that we're having these back-to-back mass shootings. And the fact is that the ones that they're putting on the news is not even covering the ones that's happening in other neighborhoods. So it's a crazy time out here. It's like the Wild Wild West, for real. People have really lost their way. People want to. A lot of people are saying because people have strayed away from God and all of those things. But people have really lost their way, and they're letting the devil into the details. Is all that I will say. When we look at Uvalde, all that is crazy, like the things that have come out since I've done my last weekly rundown. The police is no longer cooperating with the state investigation. They failed to act like, there's a whole lot going on. They tried to put it on the teacher for opening up a door, then that turned out not to be true. So it's just a whole lot of things going on in Uvalde. What it shows is that shouldn't have happened that day. That more could have been done to help those children. That they waited almost 40 minutes to an hour to go into that school. Like, there's a lot of failures there, and I was waiting to talk about it, try to get the whole story. But this is just like, that's the craziest thing I've ever heard. And when we talk about school safety, a lot of people are mad about a lot of the things that are being proposed because they feel like, schools shouldn't look like prisons. A lot of teachers don't want to be armed. They don't think that's a good idea. So it's kind of interesting to see these school safety debates too. What's going to be the best thing to keep students safe while we work on figuring out what gun laws need to be enacted to stop all of this. Like I said, I'm curious to see what law really stops this, because I feel like we have a people problem. We have people that are just desensitized, that are evil, that are monsters, and just want to be out here committing crimes. And those types of people can't be helped with a program. They can't be helped with no money, nothing. Like, I feel like some people needed early intervention and they didn't get it. I'll put it that way. A lot of 5 to 6 year olds that were fell by the wayside are now wreaking havoc in a lot of different ways. I'll put it that way. I would like to see what the legislation looks like. And there's a lot of talks about reparations for the black community. I'm curious to see if that moves beyond conversation. I don't know what that will look like for many Black Americans, but I think it's an interesting conversation to have. Um, I don't know how we prove who's who in this country, but I mean, I guess it's interesting to see the conversations being had. I'll put it that way. I feel like we are late as hell fighting for reparations. I feel like the people before us were supposed to do that fight, and we were supposed to been up there when it comes to wealth with our white counterparts. We should have been there by now, but here nor there. I'm glad that some conversation is happening. When we are talking about, I think people want a black hate bill versus like the Asian hate bill and things like that. So it's a lot of conversations being had about protecting black Americans in this country. So that's interesting. It's a lot of interesting things happening. Like I said, I don't know what's going to come out of many of these things. But I would like to see change. But I believe change starts with each one of us. I really believe that. I believe that the change starts with, human beings being human again. Until we get to that point where people are not so selfish, not so individualistic, then I don't know, like, if anything will really change. Like, we can change the laws all day long, but if these people are going to still be hateful, they're going to still be murderous, still be violent, still do all of these things, then I'm not sure what a law will do. Now, moving on, there's a housing crisis that, is going up. Like, people can't afford houses anywhere. Where I live, you got to make $19.42 just to afford a place. You got to make $4,000 to $5,000 a month just to get in a place. Like, it's crazy out here. And they say our rents are supposed to rise. So we got a lot of middle class, working poor in hotels trying to make it happen. And what they're not talking about is that inflation has hit hotels too, that they are going up on their rates. And what that means is that the most vulnerable population faces being out on the streets for real, being in their cars because there's no shelters. And nobody's talking about it. It's damn near criminal at this point that nobody's talking about people, especially in my state of Georgia. We have no tenant protection laws for those that are in extended stays or hotels. And so if a person can't make their room rate for whatever reason, they are kicked onto the streets, and there's nothing that can be done about it. It's perfectly legal. Even if that person has been there for a long time, more than 90 days, you are gone. And so I feel like those conversations need to be had. Hotels and extended stays should not be homes. You are absolutely right. But the fact that people have to call them homes in this great nation is also sad. Because a lot of people that are in hotels and extended stays are working right now. They're making lots of money. You got to make money to stay in a hotel and extended stay. So therefore, we got to figure out, why are these people in a hotel? Why are these people unhoused? Why is there no houses for people that are working, that are doing okay in life? And if it's an eviction, what can we do to seal these people's eviction? What can we do to get their credit together so they can get their own place? Nobody working should be coming to a hotel or an extended stay. Like, that's crazy. So what we see is that the income we are making does not afford us a place anywhere. And because they gave so much care about high luxury living, that, everyday Americans got screwed over. There are no starter homes. There's no townhomes, no duplexes, no single family homes, just big old buildings that stack to the high to the sky, and that are expensive as hell. That's what they focused on building. That's the lie. Like, that's crazy that they focused on high luxury building when they knew most of Americans wasn't living like that. It's kind of sad to see. As always, special interests went over the everyday American's interests. So, I mean, it's just interesting to see this little housing crisis go on, and they just go on the news and like, oh, the rent is going to rise again. The rent is going to rise. But there's no end in sight. There's no solution. Like, we just going to keep saying it and watching people get evicted, watch people go into hotel rooms, and that's it. We're not going to do nothing. Like I said, the only way in this country to really impact change, you got to make people feel it in their pockets. Until we make that type of we got to start making people uncomfortable by making them not feel money or change in their pockets, and that's just the way it goes. Because money rules everything in the United States. Either you have it or you don't, and if you don't have it, good luck, because you're going to constantly be screwed over by every person's system that comes your way, because the rich are going to keep getting richer. So in order to impact change in this country, you got to hit people in their pocket. They got to feel what we feel. They got to feel uncomfortable. They got to feel like, oh my goodness, so I got to put this pack of meat back when I'm at the cash register. Ooh, how I'm going to pay this so I don't get kicked out today. Those types of things is what our lawmakers and those that are rich need to feel. Now, how does that happen? I don't know. But I know marching and protesting and holding up signs saying housing is a right. It's great. It brings attention to the issue. But we need to start hitting people in their pockets. So at this point, they're hitting us in our pockets, and we ain't got nothing left. So that's just what I say. And that's all I got to say about housing crisis and all this other stuff. So I've talked long enough. I ranted long enough. I don't feel my best. Go get my book, Politically Jumbled, where I have all of my unpopular opinions in that book. It'll make more sense than me just rambling on here. But thank you all for tuning in. I'll check you guys out next week on the Politically Jumbled Weekly Rundown.